questions. Yeah, because you have been president of the European Parliament since January 2022, and you were rather young yourself as well. And well, yeah.
Not so young anymore, but okay. I can classify as that.
Okay, that's good, that's good. And now there's a lot of young people, thousands of young people here with a lot of ideas and perhaps even projects that they would like to see implemented within Europe. So what would you like to say to those young people?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for coming here. I would like to thank you for choosing Europe. And I would like to see that you go back at the end of this weekend. How many days will you be here for? 2 days? At the end of 2 days and say, all that I've learned, how can I implement it at home? The world is a very difficult place. Europe is undergoing and facing a lot of challenges, but if there's one thing that has characterized not only my time as president of the European Parliament for a little bit over a year and a half now, but since I've been member of this house for 10 years, is that if you believe in something and that thing can be delivered, then don't stop before you succeed. And there are moments when it's hard, when you think agreements are not possible. When, if anyone had asked me on the day of my election, would you know that 5 weeks later we would have a war on our continent? But also, if you had asked me whether we would have made such huge... Okay, now Mohammed Shahim is not going to like it that I'm going to mention him. But you see someone who's walking here there. He's a member of the European Parliament. And he's our pioneer on environmental legislation. Without him, our climate laws would not be there. Sorry. I will apologize to Mohammed later, don't worry. But I saw him walking because if it were not for colleagues like him, and I see Fabienne as well, I see colleagues here who really get together and say, we need to do more. We are still too far away from addressing the climate crisis that this world is facing. But in this house, we had the courage to do that, and we went further. And we said, let's make sure we go faster. I want to see that kind of speed in this Europe, and I want you to push us to continue to do that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, of course. I think that's indeed very inspiring, and as we are indeed with many enthusiastic young people, of course, in the room, engaged young people. You mentioned the European elections next year. There's also, of course, many young people who don't vote yet. You mentioned trying to mobilize your friends. Why is it so important to mobilize more young people to vote, and how would you do that?
I first ran as a candidate for the European Parliament when I was 24.
Wow.
And I remember thinking already then that how am I going to convince, and this was a time when my country had just joined the European Union weeks before. And my task was at the time, as a younger person, to speak to people about what the European Parliament meant. What happens in this room? How important are the votes that we managed to push through in this room? And my biggest challenge was to convince, and it remains my biggest challenge as president of this house, is that when somebody in front of me is looking at me making this argument, that person is not thinking, oh, don't worry, my vote won't matter. Not only will it matter, but if you don't, you might not like what you see. And it will be too late. Decisions in this house are explained and can be taken when they are taken with majorities that are for the survival of the European project. Sometimes different decisions could be taken. next year we would be facing, so I will run as a candidate in this election, and I will need to tell those same people why it matters to vote in 2024. And I will once again say that if it were not for the European Parliament, we would not have rule of law at the very heart of our decision making. We would not have been from this podium declaring that Europe is an LGBTI freedom zone, not as some countries are trying to do. That in Europe we protect journalists, we do not kill them, as has happened in some countries. And that there is nobody for whom Europe cannot be their home. And I think after these 5 years, we can deliver on that.
Wow.
And I'm hoping that we can convince as many people as possible to vote because of that.
All right, I think it is now time also for your questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll try to answer as many of them. We'll bundle two or three and then hopefully get back to you.
And you will have 1 minute each, and you will also see a countdown on the screen. So when you reach 0, that is your cue to stop speaking, basically.
Just like members of European Parliament.
Except that you can't stop them to stop the microphone, so it has to be up to you to
Okay,
control
okay.
your
We
your
expect
time
your
limit.
cooperation.
Okay, let's start. 392, please stand up.
And say your name,
And
say your name.
Yeah.
Wait until we can see the microphone turning red.
392.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello. Hello, Your Excellency, Madam President. My name is
Roberta's name.
Roberta.
Good.
My name is Saba. I'm from Georgia. I'm happy and honored to be here, and I'm happy and grateful to be able to ask you a question that is so important for me. As you were giving out the speech, you said a sentence that had the same meaning as this sentence. If you believe in something that can be achieved, you should do everything to make it happen. So, the thing that I believe in is that my country is European. My country... Thank you. Our culture, our traditions, our fundamental criteria are European. So last year, our friend countries, Moldova and Ukraine, got the candidate status of the European Union. But Georgia only got the European perspective, which still we're so grateful to have, because that once more determines that Georgia belongs to Europe.
Okay.
Thank
have
you
to
so
round
much.
it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
475, please stand up and wait until your mic turns red.
Great. Hi, can you hear me? Great. Hi, I'm Dominique, I'm from Romania. After the Supreme Court decision to strike down Roe v. Wade happened, I know that the European Parliament had passed a resolution on safeguarding the access to abortion. However, what we see is that people are still being restricted all around Europe on accessing their reproductive rights, and we see that here in Romania, unfortunately, on access. We see it in Malta, that still has a total abortion ban, and we see it in Poland recently, where people are dying, and Dorota just died because she had been denied life-saving abortion. So what is the position of the European Parliament on this? Because I know that we passed resolutions, but what are the further, any further action that the European Parliament is going to take on this? Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Right on time.
Well in time. And we'll take one more question from 193. The gentleman, yeah, I think it's you, in the white shirt. 193, please wait until your mic is red. Yes.
Okay. Hello. My name is Palumi, and
My name is Peace.
we have two questions. So I want to ask, my question is, what is the European Parliament's position about the effects of AI and how it's going to take over education and other parts of society in terms of the law as well and just technology in general?
My question is, how does the EU kind of aim to create more representation and awareness around kind of the disadvantages that communities such as ethnic minorities face? Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much
your
for your
concise
questions, Roberta.
questions.
One more?
Okay,
She would like to
let's do something from the sides.
Yeah.
Perhaps number 693. My vision is really testing me. Yeah, 693. Okay, and by the way, sorry, you can also speak in your own language if you prefer that, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I try in English.
Okay.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Helena. I'm from Brazil, but live in Portugal.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like talk about migration because every year 1,000 people die in Mediterranean and 1,000 people die in very other countries. And I'd like know how can Europe work. Sorry, I read. How can Europe work harder to guarantee the right to migrate and immigrate with the rights? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. So, Georgia is Europe and Europe is Georgia. Every country has its own path. As you will see, there are certain steps to be taken, but make no mistake that the transformative effect, Sava, of a country that has been either accepted as a candidate state or has been given a perspective is huge. Is huge, especially on young people. I say this from personal experience. I lived through the steps of my country being told sometimes to wait, sometimes to pause, sometimes to go faster, sometimes to do more. But at each step of the way, we were convinced we were getting closer to becoming a member of the European Union. It is this European Parliament that is always the first institution to say that enlargement should be a priority for this union. And we say it because the European Union is not just an economic bloc. It is a bloc of values. It is a bloc of peace. It is a bloc of freedom. I was in Chisinau today 1 week exactly. And you could feel the beating heart of a population that says we want to be in the European Union. And I can tell you that that resonated with every single leader who was present and whose answer was a resonant of course. So I can give you my commitment, but I speak on behalf of the European Parliament with huge majorities in this House, that your country, your president was also in the Parliament last week in Brussels, saying exactly what you said, and that commitment stands, and we will move forward with it. Dominique, the moment the judgment that you mentioned was handed down, I stood there at the opening of the plenary, and I said that women's rights in the United States and in other places in the world, including in Europe, where we see regression, that is extremely worrying. And this Parliament stands for rights, liberty and equality everywhere. We also say this, I think, every session when we meet to remind of the need to take care of what is happening to women in Iran. Because the term women, life and liberty was coined on the streets of Tehran, where women are repressed every day. And that is something that this parliament stands for, whether in Europe and outside Europe. On AI, we have a very difficult vote next week in this House. But what I'm looking forward to is the most advanced, courageous, broad legislation worldwide on AI. And it would have started here. Here. We have a lot to do. We're waiting for the entry into force of the Digital Services Act on the 1st of September, because that will also matter as to how we, as politicians, but also as lawmakers, interact online in the face or in a world where technology is running at breakneck speed, at a time where we need to embrace that. We need to know and, let's say, once again, embrace the advantages, but also be aware that there is always space for abuse. And that abuse needs to be closed. If it's not, then it is the vulnerable who will suffer. And vulnerability means different things, whether it is economic vulnerability or social vulnerability, but frankly speaking also, in our case, when we run a house of democracy, which is the antithesis of anyone who leads, if you can call the word lead, an autocracy, thinks that we are the antithesis of that autocracy, that tools that are created for good or for progress could be abused against the vulnerable. And that is a balance that we seek to find here. On integration and awareness, this House stands for openness. And you will see, in fact, even when we looked at certain laws, such as the one passed in the Ugandan parliament 2 weeks ago, when we organize summits, for example, with leaders of different continents. So you have the EU Latin America summit coming along on the 17th of July, which I will participate in, the EU Africa summit that took place last year. My position is always that we talk to all countries as equals. We have a responsibility in the European Union to do just that. The world is about partnerships, and the world is about equality. And that's what I think we did not do well enough in the past. And that is why in our societies there is marginalization, there is intolerance, there is extreme poverty, which we have for far too long not tackled directly. And it is about time that we do that.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Migration, quickly. Sorry, because I need to keep myself some time. This is actually my job, to keep time, so I'll do it. On migration, Zalena. Yesterday, after 7 years of bloc negotiations, the Council of the European Union started to unblock a very, very difficult migration pact. And that means, I see Fabienne Keller here, who is from Strasbourg, used to be mayor of this beautiful city, so please, I want you to acknowledge she's quaestor of this house. She's a member, she's a leading negotiator in this house on migration. And we stand very clearly on a balanced pact that respects, that protects, that is fair, but that does not allow for abuse of the most vulnerable people on this planet. And we will continue to fight for that. But at least we get to negotiate. Don't underestimate that. Until yesterday night, we thought that would not be possible in this mandate. Now it is. So rooms outside this hemicycle will be used to bring together members of this European Parliament and ministers of the different governments to negotiate a pact that is fair and that's just.
Wow, thank you so much. And I see that it's already 12 o'clock, but I see also that there's a lot of people with questions. So what I want to do is just take one question from the online audience and one from the audience here in the hemicycle. And from the online audience, we have Giovanni and Emily asking, what are you excited to see from young Europeans these 2 days? So that is their question, very concise.
And then we have one more question from the room, and that is 427. Please stand up and wait until your mic. And we're going to ask you kindly to please have a short question and also relatively short answers, because we're out of time.
Yeah, hard job, huh?
Thank you for being here. It's an honor for me as well. My name's Sarah and I'm coming from Romania. And you mentioned the elections taking place next year, and in my country all the elections are taking place next year. And in the light of that, I was going to ask, and considering that a lot of political campaign nowadays takes place on social media, what is the European Parliament's position on combating and fighting against disinformation and misinformation taking place before the elections and visualizing them? Thank you.
Wow.
Very important question.
Sarah, you should be a member of the European Parliament.
Right.
There's an election, you should run for it. That's a perfect question, and it's one that we ask ourselves in this house. So, Giovanni and Emily, what am I most excited? You know, I was looking at you now. How old are you approximately?
Who is under 22?
Who is under 20? Who is under 18? Nobody's under 18. You are under 18.
In general, 16 to 30.
So, you know, next year, I like that. Next year, in 4 countries, 16-year-olds will vote for the European Parliament. That's super cool. That's super cool. That's what I'm excited about. That every 16-year-old in Europe can find a candidate who he or she or them can rally behind. But I need to do my job. I need to convince. I have a 16-year-old son. I need to convince him to vote next year.
Is that going to be a difficult job?
Well, I hope he votes for me. But I need to convince him. And I need to tell him what Europe stands for people like him, and what I need to ask from him what he wants. From me, not as his mom. He wants a lot of things from me as his mom. But as his representative. So I'm excited about the potential of Europe and this house to reach everybody in Europe, no matter whether you live in a town, you live in the countryside, you live far away from where you have access to health services, educational services, sometimes most basic services, that you feel that this house stands for you too. That's what I'm most excited about. On social media, yes, this is one of our biggest concerns, Sarah, on combating disinformation. I worry. I worry that, and this is not a question of what is true and what is fake, you know. It's difficult for a politician to say, yes, what I'm saying is the truth and what everybody else is saying is not. What I'm hoping is that any efforts by whoever wants to destroy this house to infiltrate a news feed is not very successful. That's what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that and now I will make a specific point, that every young person in Europe, but especially young girls in Europe, are not more afraid tomorrow than they are afraid today. Because that's a real problem that we have, a massive one. And if I have to tell you something before apparently I need to leave, is that do not be afraid. Stand up for what you believe in, and do not let anybody tell you what to do. You decide what you want to do. Stand up for it. Sometimes you will fall. Pull yourself up and walk on. Only you can do it, but we are here to help. Thank you very much.
Wow.
There is somebody who wants to ask a question, but I thought that you could come and say. So,
Well, then you
I
would
can do
need a
this. Yes,
mic.
don't
We're going to
worry.
give you a mic.
Come on. I saw him. So
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
I'm from Moldova, so thank you for being in my capital city. I know that certainly in 7 years, I hope, my flag will be here. But my questions about the elections was, I'm European for 12 years. I live in Italy for many, many years. And I can't vote, being citizen of Moldova, but having all documents from Italy, but I can't vote. We should do something with this, because we have millions of people who are from Georgia, who are from Brazil, who are from everywhere, and are Europeans already, but can't vote.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your question.
Sorry for the... I broke a little bit your rules.
You were the president of the European Parliament.
Well,
Madam President,
He's right.
any final words for him and for the whole crowd here?
You're right. One thing I would disagree. You have always been European. You're not just only European because you live in Italy. But you are right. We need to do more to have more inclusive elections. It's not easy. Every country has different rules, whether it's about residence, whether it's about citizenship, but it must be made easier for someone like you to be able to vote. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the question.
yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I think that this is an inspiring note to end the opening session and indeed to start I-2021, right?
Can we get one last final applause and a big thank you to the President of the European Parliament, Roberta METSOLA.
Thank you. Have fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a lot of fun, huh?